Hey guys, tonight we walk with soft sandals over chilled marble, right through the bronze-hinged doors of an imperial palace, where torches hiss, fountains murmur, and the scent of warm beeswax floats like a quiet spell over the corridors. We stand among spear-tipped guards and perfumed courtiers, and look toward a guarded suite just as Rome's ruler vanishes. No shouting, no clatter, not even the soft scuff of a sandal left behind. One heartbeat an emperor, the next an empty silence that makes even the mosaic seem to hold their breath. You probably won't survive this if you try to verify it by sneaking past professional bodyguards, but that's why we are telling the story, while you stay safely horizontal. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is in your part of the world. Now find yourself a cozy seat or a soft bed. Let your mind begin to unwind, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The palace stands like a city inside a city, a layered maze of courtyards, porticos and galleries that stretches for more than 200 metres, about 656 feet, along the ridge above the water. Floors gleam with stone tesserae, lamplight trembles in gold leaf, walls listen. The night in question begins the way most imperial nights begin. The emperor receives petitions until his patience goes brittle, offers a small smile to ambassadors who want big favours, and retreats to a private dining room where figs sit on chilled plates and a singer plucks a minor tune. Then he excuses himself for the bath and bed, the official bedtime ballet. He steps through one door, the attendants bow, the guards take their posts, and that is the last time anyone can swear they see him. The routine is clockwork. Imperial bedrooms are sealed like treasure chests with door bars as thick as a wrist and locks that would make your apartment jealous. 2 guards remain outside the main door, 2 at the antechamber and more at the corridor mouth. An inner window opens only to a walled garden. A steward makes the final inspection, counts the lamps and withdraws. Somewhere in the palace a fountain clicks as droplets fall in an even rhythm. Somewhere else a cat patrols with the rank of unofficial rat consul. In the morning servants knock to wake the ruler, and the day refuses to open because the door does not open. A captain orders. The bar lifted, the screws turned, the hinges eased. The chamber within looks as if sleep itself has been carefully stage-folded, cloak-covered brazier. The faint perfume of spikenard, a wooden writing tablet on the table. Stylus laid neatly, wax unmarked since last night. The bed is made, but not slept in. The sandals neatly paired, the night cup still half full, as if the emperor intended to return after one more consultation. It has the crisp wrongness of a theatre set after the actor misses his cue. Guards begin whispering. Someone makes the inevitable joke that losing your emperor is a career-limiting event. No one laughs for long. A mainstream historical fact helps anchor the seen emperors in late antiquity, and the early medieval centuries are protected by elite household troops, sometimes barbarian in origin but fiercely loyal, stationed in rings that function like living walls. Whether we imagine the old Praetorians or later palace guards, the principle is the same, layers upon layers of watchfulness. Smuggling a ruler out through all that vigilance would be like hiding an elephant under a cloak. The corridors even have patrol markers niches where oil lamps must be checked at fixed intervals, rounds that make laziness obvious, and yet the ruler evaporates between 2 burns of a lamp. A quirky rumour clings to the tale, the emperor bored by panegyrics, and frightened of flattery sometimes roams the city in disguise, wrapped in a plain cloak and dusted with ash, like an actor between scenes listening to market gossip or tavern songs. It is said he owns a box of wigs and false beards, and that he practices a cough to sound like a scholar with bad lungs. If that is even partly true, the palace is a stage he knows by heart, and exits exist that only the playwright notices. The idea is both romantic and mortifying. Romantic because kings in costume are fun, mortifying because it means the world's most guarded man keeps sneaking out like a teenager. Historians still argue whether this disappearance belongs to a weak ruler buckling beneath court factions, or to a cunning emperor staging his own absence to expose traitors. Some say it happens in Rome, others swear it happens in Constantinople, the new Rome where the sea kisses the palace gardens, and the hippodrome crowd can unmake a rain by roaring in the wrong key. The sources written by men who see through keyholes and then write as if they stood in doorways do not agree. They offer different menus for the same banquet poison in the wine, a secret passage and abduction by eunuchs on the payroll of an ambitious aunt, a door hidden in a mural of grapevines. Each account is certain, all are incompatible. An investigation begins the only way such things begin, by counting. Guards are mustered and names taken. Night watch schedules are recopied on wax tablets. The Master of Offices demands oaths. A physician squints at the cup and pronounces the dregs ordinary. A steward traces the pattern of lamp smoke on the ceiling as if it could spell an answer. The garden is combed for footprint sand, there is too coarse to hold them, but one soldier insists the laurel leaves are bent as if brushed by a man's shoulder. Another soldier's rumour says a rope as thick as a thumb and 50 metres long, about 164 feet, disappeared from the storeroom last week. Suddenly everyone remembers a detail. Unfortunately, no two details agree. The city beyond the palace already hums with mourning. Bakers heave loaves into baskets. Coppersmiths wake their furnaces. A child runs with a hoop in the street and earns a scolding for joyfully existing before breakfast. Word travels even faster than bread. By noon, the circus factions shout different theories in the hippodrome. One side claims the emperor ascended like a saint. The other mutters that a certain general's boots have been very clean lately, which is suspicious if you think about it. The joke of the day, our second, and it lands better, is that the imperial cure for insomnia will now be sold to the public. Simply misplace the head of state. Laughter tastes nervous. Inside, the queen, or the mother or the sister, depending on which version you favour, presses officials with cool questions. Who was on the last watch? How many lamps burned? Did anyone hear a cough? A footfall? A hinge? A slave remembers a smell like wet wool near the garden wall. Another insists a dove struck the window as if trying to carry a message. Omens multiply because fear loves decoration. Priests hurry in, requested or not, and offer a fast in exchange for a find. A diviner unfolds a small bundle of twigs and declares them unfavourable, which earns him a look from the chamberlain that promises a new career in agriculture if this continues. We are left as the first night gives way to its mirror image, with a palace that closes more tightly than ever. Doors barred, guards doubled, a lockmaker summoned to improve locks that already have no business being improved. Somewhere in an archive, a clerk begins a clean sheet. On the night of... The quill squeaks. He pauses, realising that dates can be argued and names can be scrubbed, but paper remembers the tremor in a sentence. The entry will be copied, altered, weaponised by partisans. It will also outlive the people who read it today by 1,000 years. What we know, we scarcely know. A palace designed to trap secrets fails to trap a man. A city trained to read omens reads too many. A bureaucracy built to count loses count where it matters most. And we stand at the threshold listening to echoes that sound like footsteps moving away down a very long corridor. That corridor bends, then vanishes into darkness, and the night begins again. Same torches, same guards, a missing emperor whose absence weighs more than his presence ever did. Somewhere, perhaps, a disguised man smiles under a false beard. Somewhere else, a rival sharpens a plan on the whetstone of opportunity. The marble stays cold. The bed stays made. The mystery clicks shut like a jewellery box whose key nobody can find. The palace is a machine of habit, its gears wound tight with ritual, and when a single cog fails, the entire mechanism rattles. The morning after the emperor vanishes, servants shuffle into their places as if expecting routine to conjure their master back into being. They draw curtains, light lamps, and prepare warm water scented faintly with myrrh. A steward arranges the emperor's cloak across a wooden chair, smoothing the folds as though the fabric itself might call him to breakfast. But the chair stays empty, and with each passing moment the silence becomes heavier. Guards at the doorway glance at one another, their faces stiff with the effort of appearing calm. They have stood vigil through the night, rotating in careful watches. By their account, nothing unusual occurred. No stranger entered, no latch, shifted, no torch, guttered into ominous smoke. Yet when they unbarred the chamber at dawn, their ruler was not there. The absence resounds louder than any trumpet call. A palace used to certainty stumbles into confusion. The daily rhythm of the imperial household begins to fray. Normally a line of petitioners gathers at the audience hall. Provincial envoys clutch scrolls begging tax relief. Officers arrive in polished armour to request promotions. Lawyers rehearse arguments on behalf of clients too nervous to stand alone. Today the hall remains closed. A senior chamberlain mumbles that the emperor is indisposed, but the word drips with insincerity. Courtiers exchange looks sharp enough to cut parchment. Everyone smells a mystery, and mysteries in Rome rarely end politely. Mainstream history tells us that Roman emperors lived encircled by ritual. Augustus established the pattern-structured audiences meals at prescribed hours, even set phrases repeated to supplicants. By late antiquity, the pattern had hardened into a cage of ceremony. Every movement of the emperor was choreographed. Even his silences carried meaning. To disrupt that choreography was like stopping the water in the aqueduct, unthinkable, yet devastating when it happened. Rumours sprout like weeds in the marble cracks. Some whisper that the emperor slipped away to test his generals, gauging their loyalty in his absence. Others mutter that assassins spirited him out, leaving the chamber neat so suspicion would scatter aimlessly. A few servants, braver or more reckless, claim he simply grew weary of the throne and fled into obscurity, preferring bread and olives at a roadside tavern to endless debates in the Senate. The image of a ruler disguised as a peasant has undeniable appeal. One imagines him complaining about watered wine like any other diner. Still, historians argue whether such a flight could be achieved in a palace, watched by dozens of eyes. A quirky detail surfaces in the gossip the emperor's favourite hound, a sleek Molossian bred in Epirus, was also missing. The dog's collar inlaid with small bronze studs is found hanging from a hook in the stable, but no one remembers seeing the animal after dusk. Did the emperor take his companion with him, slipping through some hidden exit? Or did someone remove the dog to erase traces of what really happened? The tale grows fur as quickly as it grows doubt. Meanwhile, the Senate receives only fragments of news. Senators shuffle into the curia, their togas hanging in sombre folds. Debate sparks quickly. Some insist on continuity decrees must still be issued. The people must see no break in governance. Others argue for transparency, demanding a full investigation before any business resumes. The Praetorian prefect, caught between dignity and dread, declares that the emperor is engaged in reflection, a phrase so vague it could mean anything from prayer to permanent disappearance. The senators grumble but take no decisive step. Fear has a way of slowing even the loudest voices. In the city outside, ordinary Romans notice the shift. The emperor normally appears in the imperial box at the circus, or sends a message read aloud in the forum. His absence becomes an unspoken headline carried in whispers from butcher stalls to bathhouses. A baker tells a customer that the emperor has gone to consult oracles. A vintner swears he heard the bells of the Capitoline ring at an odd hour, a sign of omen. Children play at vanishing emperors, one hiding under a cloak while the others pretend to search. Even in jest, the unease seeps into their games. The palace staff, meanwhile, work through the practicalities of an absence that refuses to explain itself. The kitchens still prepare meals, their steam rising pointlessly into rafters. Scribal clerks still sharpen their reeds, though their tablets remain blank. Guards double their patrols as though more footsteps can erase the mystery left by one missing set. And yet the absence lingers thick as incense after a ceremony. Even the statues seem to look down in accusation, marble brows furrowed as if demanding an explanation. Historians still argue whether the emperor's disappearance was immediate or gradual. Some chronicles claim he vanished in a single night. Others suggest he withdrew from public view over days, feigning illness, before slipping fully from sight. The difference matters, a sudden vanishing hints at conspiracy. A gradual retreat suggests design, perhaps even collusion by those closest to him. The sources contradict one another, leaving modern readers no firmer ground than the palace courtyards once offered. At noon, the prefect calls a meeting of senior officials in a domed hall. Light filters through high windows, scattering dust motes like tiny heralds. The men sit on curved benches, their robes a sea of russet, indigo and teal. They debate security, succession and silence. Should the people be told? Should troops be summoned to the capital? The argument circles endlessly like a chariot stuck on the same lap. No one wants to admit ignorance. No one dares to assert knowledge. In the end, they resolve only to keep watch and hope the emperor strolls back in smiling faintly, as if this were all a test. But evening comes, and no figure returns. Torches sputter in the courtyard, smoke smearing the twilight. Guards tense at every shadow. Servants creep along corridors listening for footsteps that never arrive. The city beyond thrums with speculation, and the palace holds its breath. Routine has not been restored. It has been revealed as fragile theatre easily shattered by the absence of its central actor. The emperor's routines have unravelled. and with them the illusion of certainty that bound Rome together. Whispers move faster than soldiers, and by the second day of the emperor's absence the palace corridors buzz like a disturbed hive. Servants carry trays with no destination. Courtiers linger in corners, and every cough or creak is interpreted as the herald of revelation. Marble walls, which once echoed with ceremony, now trap fragments of rumour. Each whisper collides with another, until the air itself seems thick with speculation. The senators arrive in tighter clusters, cloaks-drawn heads bowed together. They are masters of rumour as much as of law, and their voices drop into cautious tones. Some suggest that the emperor has fled through secret passages to join an army stationed at the frontier. Others hint at darker designs, poison smothering or abduction, all carried out within the very palace built to prevent such things. Historians still argue whether the Senate genuinely believed these theories, or spread them deliberately, fanning panic to weaken rivals. Amid these whispers, servants contribute their own versions. One maid claims she saw the emperor's shadow flicker across a courtyard wall hours after he vanished. A kitchen boy swears the emperor ordered food from the night shift, though no one recalls seeing him collect it. Another servant remembers hearing a faint metallic toll in the gardens, though whether it was a bell or imagination no one can agree. In a palace where even a dropped spoon can spark suspicion, every detail becomes a clue, every clue a thread leading nowhere. The mainstream fact remains: emperors were surrounded by layers of staff scribes, guards, stewards, cooks, messengers, hundreds of people in constant attendance. For a ruler to vanish without at least one person witnessing something concrete is almost absurd. The sheer density of eyes makes the mystery heavier, not lighter. Instead of clarity, abundance produces contradiction. The more witnesses speak, the less coherent the story becomes. Quirky details pepper the chatter. A rumour claims that the emperor was spirited away by astrologers who convinced him the stars demanded solitude. Another insists he donned the robes of a priest, and now wanders the basilicas disguised, seeking divine counsel. A particularly fanciful tale suggests that he has hidden himself among actors in the theatre, revelling in freedom as a stagehand who sweeps the floor. Each story says more about the tellers than about the emperor. Senators imagine plots because politics is their air. Servants imagine disguises because they know how often garments transform roles. Astrologers imagine celestial commands because that is their trade. The guards, feeling the sharp edge of suspicion, begin to mutter in self-defence. They insist their posts were never abandoned, that their eyes did not waver, that no shadow slipped past them. Yet one soldier admits under pressure that he dozed briefly when the lamps burned low. Another confesses he heard footsteps but assumed they belonged to a fellow guard. Such admissions feed the rumour mill like scraps tossed to hungry dogs. A palace that once prided itself on vigilance now feels porous, riddled with uncertainty. In the taverns beyond the palace walls, whispers gain louder voices. Patrons lean on rough tables, mugs of wine sloshing as speculation grows theatrical. One man swears that the emperor has been abducted by barbarian mercenaries spirited away through tunnels beneath the city. Another insists the ruler was lifted bodily by angels, punishment or reward depending on the teller's bias. A juggler makes coins dance across his fingers, while claiming that emperors are like coins themselves. They vanish into pockets, reappear in markets, and sometimes are simply lost down a drain. The tavern roars with laughter, but the undertone remains uneasy. Historians still argue whether these rumours reflect genuine fear or entertainment value. Rome was a city where gossip served as currency. Speculation was as much pastime as politics. But in moments of crisis, that currency could destabilise entire regimes. A vanished emperor meant not only mystery but also opportunity. Every whisper could be sharpened into a weapon against rivals, every theory a seed for ambition. Inside the palace, the empress or consort or mother, depending on which version is told, summons trusted advisers. She listens with the stillness of marble, weighing each rumour with a cool eye. Her questions cut sharper than swords. Who stands to gain? Which general smiles too often? Which senator grows suddenly silent? Her presence steadies some, unnerves others. In a world where women's voices are often sidelined, her calm interrogation becomes a lodestone. Chroniclers note her involvement with varying degrees of respect, some admiring her composure, others dismissing it as meddling. Yet she persists, aware that silence is more dangerous than suspicion. Meanwhile, foreign envoys pace uneasily. Ambassadors from allied cities worry that the disappearance signals weakness, while rivals wonder if this is the moment to press advantage. Letters are drafted hastily sealed with wax and sent down roads, where dust clouds rise behind galloping horses. The Empire's borders will hear the rumour long before the truth, whatever the truth is. Armies move on rumour as much as on grain. The palace corridors grow more theatrical each day. Courtiers adopt expressions of grave concern, though many privately revel in the chance to position themselves for future favour. Poets compose verses lamenting the emperor's absence, circulating them in whispered recitations that flatter the absent man while hinting at his mortality. Priests conduct ceremonies praying for his safe return, while secretly hoping the gods have cleared a throne for someone more generous with temple donations. The empire functions, but it functions like a play in which the lead actor has left the stage, and every understudy is improvising lines. By evening, the whispers settle into a strange rhythm like the tolling of bells themselves. The emperor has become less a man, and more a story reshaped with every retelling. He is abducted, ascended, disguised, murdered, hidden, wandering, or divine. Each version gathers believers, each is defended fiercely, none can be disproven. The marble halls are filled not with certainty, but with echoes. The emperor may be gone, but his absence has multiplied him into countless possibilities. And so the palace becomes not just a seat of power, but a theatre of rumour. The guards patrol as before, the senators argue as before, the servants polish as before, but all under the heavy question mark of a vanished ruler. The empire itself seems to pause, waiting for an answer that refuses to arrive. And in the silence between whispers, the corridors echo louder than ever. The chamber is locked. Bolts slide into grooves as thick as thumbs, and iron braces span the door. Guards stand shoulder to shoulder, spears, angled shields resting against polished stone. In theory, this is the safest room in the empire, the inner core of a fortress within a fortress. And yet, when dawn arrives, the emperor has vanished. The puzzle grips everyone with icy fingers. It is not just that the ruler is gone, it is that he has dissolved inside a sealed box. Scholars centuries later will call this a locked room mystery, but for the palace it is not a clever story. It is a catastrophe. The soldiers on duty swear their eyes never wavered. One admits to rubbing his lids when smoke stung them, but he insists his ears heard nothing. Another recalls faint creaks which he dismissed as timber settling. The chamberlain insists that he checked the locks himself, pressing each one into place, and yet the absence gapes. It is as if the air itself reached out, took the emperor by the hand, and spirited him through the keyhole. Historians still argue whether such testimonies represent genuine recollection or desperate self-protection. Losing an emperor can be more dangerous than losing a battle. A mainstream fact reminds us Roman palaces often included private corridors, hidden staircases, and service passages designed for discretion. Emperors valued both security and convenience, and builders threaded secret veins through the marble body of the palace. Some led to gardens, some to courtyards, some to underground storerooms. A ruler could move unseen, or be moved unseen if knowledge of these routes was precise. The locked room puzzle may not have been supernatural, it may have been architectural. Yet the guards who swore their watch was tight now face the humiliation of realizing their fortress was riddled with back doors. Rumours about tunnels multiply. A servant claims that a section of mosaic near the chamber floor can be lifted like a trapdoor. A soldier insists he felt a draught where no window should be, as though air leaked from an underground passage. One story says the emperor's bed itself can descend lowered by ropes into a chamber below. Another claims a mural of vines hides a panel that slides open. Each tale adds a flourish, like embroidery on a cloak, until the reality is obscured by decoration. Quirky anecdotes appear in the chronicles. One account suggests that a mouse was seen scurrying beneath the emperor's door just before dawn, and some believed it was the ruler transformed by sorcery. Another claims that the emperor owned a ring engraved with a magical inscription enabling him to vanish at will. Modern readers smile at these touches, but in a palace where superstition is stitched into daily life, such details were not jokes, they were warnings. Investigators search the chamber with anxious intensity. They lift rugs, knock on walls, and scrape at plaster. They measure distances by pacing, then pacing again, as if footsteps can reveal what eyes cannot. In the corner, a brazier still holds faint coals, giving off the smell of cedar. The writing table shows only a blank tablet. A cloak lies folded its hem, smelling faintly of sea salt, though no one can explain why. Every item becomes evidence, every smell an omen. Yet the emperor remains absent, and the locked room puzzle grows heavier with each unanswered question. Historians still argue whether the emperor left willingly or was taken. If he left, then secrecy was deliberate, perhaps to test loyalty, or to escape intrigue. If he was taken, then the conspiracy reached into the very heart of the palace. Neither option comforts. One implies a ruler so mistrustfully abandons his own guard. The other implies an enemy so bold they can pluck the head of state from the most secure chamber in the world. Both reveal fragility. Outside, the city speculates in colourful detail. In the Forum, a philosopher claims the emperor dissolved into airproof, that rulers are more idea than flesh. At a tavern, a drunk insists he heard hoofbeats in the night, as though the emperor rode away on a phantom horse. A baker jokes that if the ruler can vanish from a locked room, then surely tax collectors can vanish too, earning laughter sharp with wishful thinking. Stories spread faster than decrees, and the locked room puzzle becomes a stage on which every imagination performs. Inside, officials attempt to seize control of the narrative. One declares that the emperor is on retreat seeking divine guidance in solitude. Another insists he is ill, recovering quietly. Both explanations crumble when pressed, for how can illness or solitude be squared with locked doors and anxious guards? The very need for explanation reveals the weakness of the palace's control. Once mystery leaks into the streets, it cannot be mended with tidy words. Among the court poets, the locked room puzzle becomes metaphor. One writes that an emperor is a flame contained in glass. When the glass breaks, the flame flees. Another sighs that Rome itself is a locked room and the gods have turned the key. Such verses circulate like smuggled wine, intoxicating readers with the sense that they witnessed not only a disappearance but a parable. Perhaps the empire itself is slipping away as silently as its ruler. Perhaps all locks are illusions no stronger than the hands that fashion them. The investigation continues, but each discovery leads only to more questions. Scratches on a wall suggest movement, yet no passage is found. A damp mark on the floor hints at spillage, but no vessel lies nearby. A faint smell of oil lingers near the door hinges, though they were polished the day before. Every detail feeds speculation, and speculation refuses to resolve into fact. The locked room puzzle remains exactly that a riddle posed by the palace itself. By evening, torches flicker against the chamber walls, casting long shadows that look almost human. Guards still stand at their posts, but their eyes dart nervously. Servants shuffle past, whispering that the emperor has become a spirit walking unseen among them. A priest mutters that the chamber is cursed, its silence heavier than stone. The locked room mystery has become more than a problem to solve. It has become a haunting, and so the palace endures another night, doors barred, corridors patrolled, whispers unending. The emperor has not returned. The locks are still in place. The chamber is still intact, and yet the ruler is gone, leaving behind only the riddle of how a man can vanish when no exit exists. The puzzle gnaws at the empire like a rat at grain-small teeth, steady work, devastating loss. Shadows lengthen across the marble as suspicion thickens. The emperor may be gone, but his absence fills the palace with a presence more suffocating than his rule ever did. Conspiracies sprout like weeds in spring, each one nourished by fear, envy, or ambition. Every figure of importance becomes both suspect and suspected. The empire, so proud of its ceremonies, suddenly feels like a stage play, where all the actors eye each other with daggers behind their smiles. The generals are first in line for scrutiny. Commanders stationed near the capital are accused of plotting, though none can prove it. One, a veteran with scars across his cheek, swears that he never left his villa during the night in question. Another, younger and more ambitious, is rumoured to have slipped bribes to guards, though no coin is ever found. Historians still argue whether military men engineered the disappearance to install a more pliant figurehead, or whether they were scapegoats for an event no one could explain. In a world where armies hold the true balance of power, even a raised eyebrow from a general can feel like treason. Then come the courtiers. Ministers whisper too loudly, secretaries misplace documents, and every stumble is treated as evidence. A chamberlain who lingers too long by a window is accused of signalling conspirators outside. A scribe whose candle burns later than usual is rumoured to be copying incriminating orders. A servant overheard humming a tune is said to be mocking the absent ruler. The paranoia spreads like smoke, staining every action with suspicion. Mainstream history shows us that imperial courts were nests of rivalry. Family members schemed against one another. Eunuchs wielded influence disproportionate to their station. Senators waited for opportunities to pounce. When the centre vanished, gravity itself seemed to collapse, and all those rivalries jostled to fill the void. The emperor's disappearance became not just a mystery, but a lever for ambition. Quirky stories decorate the records. One tale claims that the emperor's cousin, jealous of being excluded from succession, hired actors to impersonate guards and spirit the ruler away. Another insists that a group of eunuchs conspired, claiming they could move silently through the palace, carrying the emperor like a stolen statue. A particularly bizarre rumour suggests that the imperial cook laced the ruler's food with herbs that caused hallucinations, convincing him to walk willingly into the night. No evidence survives, but the stories prove how conspiracy flourishes where certainty dies. In the Senate, the whispers grow sharper. Senators accuse one another with veiled words hinting that fortunes gained too quickly must be tied to treachery. Political factions use the disappearance as fuel, some calling for stability, others demanding change. Debates stretch into the night, cloaks drawn-tight voices edged with calculation. If the emperor does not return, who inherits the purple? Who claims the diadem and its glittering burden? Succession is Rome's most dangerous game, and with the throne empty, every player sharpens their knives. Historians still argue whether family intrigue played the largest role. Some claim the empress, weary of being overshadowed, arranged her husband's removal. Others accuse ambitious nephews or brothers, pointing to small gestures recorded in chronicles, an heir's hand resting too casually on a sword, a relative's sudden generosity to soldiers. None of these details are definitive, but in the imagination of contemporaries they paint entire portraits of guilt. The palace becomes a labyrinth of mistrust. Guards are questioned, reassigned, punished. Some are whipped not for crimes, but for failure. Officials are shuffled in and out of office with dizzying speed, as though rearranging titles might conjure the missing emperor. Servants whisper of secret arrests in the night men dragged away beneath hoods. The palace, once a beacon of imperial order, now resembles a haunted house, where footsteps echo without owner. Meanwhile, the city outside drinks deeply of the intrigue. Tavern keepers serve wine in clay cups and speculate loudly about who benefits from the vanishing. Merchants gossip in the marketplace, pointing to senators they dislike as obvious culprits. Children scroll graffiti on walls, crude sketches of an emperor with wings, a senator with a dagger, a general clutching chains. Even satire becomes dangerous, for humour often lands closer to truth than accusation. One mainstream fact anchors this chaos. Roman emperors frequently faced plots both real and imagined. Assassinations had removed rulers before, from Julius Caesar stabbed in the Senate to emperors poisoned at feasts. The disappearance fits a pattern, even if its method is more elusive. Conspiracy is the empire's constant companion, a shadow that grows longer with every flicker of torchlight. A quirky anecdote surfaces from a chronicle written decades later. A poet claimed he saw the emperor wandering the countryside dressed as a pilgrim, living off bread and figs. Skeptics laugh, but believers cling to the tale as proof that the disappearance was self-chosen. Perhaps the emperor escaped not from enemies, but from the suffocating weight of power. After all, who wouldn't occasionally fantasize about trading the diadem for a quiet life under a fig tree? But within the palace, the tone is not whimsical. Suspicion corrodes loyalty. Friends become enemies. Overnight, alliances shift like sand in the wind, and every eye looks for advantage. Officials speak in riddles, their words layered with hidden meaning. A servant's careless laugh can condemn him. A soldier's silence can be interpreted as guilt. The emperor's absence is a wound that refuses to clot, and the blood of rumour seeps everywhere. By the end of the week, conspiracies have multiplied beyond counting. Some claim the emperor was abducted by foreign agents smuggled out in a merchant cart. Others whisper that he staged his own disappearance to test loyalty. Still others insist he lies dead within the palace walls, his body hidden beneath slabs of marble or buried in the garden. Historians still argue which, if any, of these theories holds truth. The only certainty is uncertainty. The palace breathes uneasily. Guards march more stiffly. Senators speak more cautiously. Servants scurry more silently. The shadow of conspiracy stretches over every hall, every chamber, every whisper. The emperor is gone, and in his absence suspicion rules Rome with a grip colder and heavier than iron. The disappearance of an emperor is dramatic enough when whispered in the private corners of a palace, but it becomes something far stranger when the evidence or lack of it starts to be inspected. Imagine the corridors after his vanishing sandals slapping hurriedly across marble torches flaring as guards rush from one gilded archway to another, and servants blinking like startled owls, each insisting they saw nothing unusual. The air is heavy with a mixture of incense and panic, and a few soldiers wonder aloud if they should check under the banquet tables just in case. The humour of that thought is not lost on later chroniclers, but at the time the tension is palpable. After all, how does the most guarded man in the empire simply walk away? Or was he taken? Historians still argue whether the absence of a body points to abduction, voluntary flight, or something more supernatural that nobody dared to name outright. The palace staff begin recounting the night's routine in exacting detail, like nervous actors repeating their lines. One maid swears she brought a jug of water to his chambers, the ceramic vessel cool and sweating with condensation, but when she returned at dawn the jug was untouched, the room eerily tidy. A guard posted at the bronze doors says he heard no disturbance, no scraping of hinges, no suspicious shuffle of sandals in the corridor. Another claims he did hear a low metallic echo like a bell tolling from far off, though whether it was a real sound or his own imagination straining against silence will never be known. In the absence of the emperor himself, every noise becomes suspect. The empire had a habit of inventing explanations when facts fell short, and this case was no exception. Some insisted the emperor had been smuggled out in a laundry basket, carried past drowsy guards who were too busy yawning to notice. Others, more dramatic, claimed he had vanished in a flash of divine fire, Zeus-like, punished for sins that courtiers politely refused to enumerate. Then there were the pragmatists who suspected poison, pointing out that if he had collapsed behind locked doors, someone might have spirited the body away to prevent scandal. But here the problem sharpened, no one could agree on who would dare such a thing, and without agreement gossip simply spiralled in ever-widening circles. One scribe in Constantinople, probably enjoying his wine a little too much, scrawled a note suggesting the emperor had grown tired of taxes, petitions and arguments with bishops, and had simply walked into the sea to start a quieter life as a fisherman. That line was copied with amusement, though few took it seriously. Still, it highlights the mood of the time. People were less interested in truth than in shaping a story that made sense, even if the sense was absurd. A mainstream fact remains, however, that palaces were heavily guarded, patrolled day and night by soldiers sworn to their emperor. Their discipline was strict, punishable by lash or exile if they failed, and yet not one claimed to see him go. Scholars have long compared this mystery to the later case of the vanished English princes in the Tower of London, pointing out that palaces can be prisons just as much as sanctuaries. The difference here is that the emperor was not a boy under guard, but the supreme ruler himself, surrounded by layers of loyalty and fear. If anyone plotted against him, it required either massive complicity or some uncanny stroke of fortune. Skeptics argue that records might have been falsified after the fact erased to protect powerful conspirators. Supporters of divine explanations meanwhile nod solemnly and say, the silence of the palace is itself proof of intervention from beyond. The palace gardens offer another thread to pull. A servant tending olive trees near midnight insisted he saw shadows moving by the fountain. At first he thought them guards, but when no one responded to his whispered greeting, he claimed the shadows simply melted into the hedges. Later he added that the nightingales fell silent at that very moment, as if paying respect. His account is preserved in a minor chronicle, and while most historians laugh it off, it lingers as one of those details too odd to completely discard. The quirky image of an emperor blending into garden hedges like some overgrown shrub has become a favourite aside for modern writers, though its value as evidence is negligible. What makes the case so haunting is not simply that he disappeared, but that no trace, no sandal, no robe, no hurried footprint on dusty tile was ever found. Roman record-keeping, though sometimes chaotic, was not without rigour. Emperors had clerks trailing their every movement, scribes recording their edicts, and stewards noting their meals down to the weight of figs and cuts of meat. And yet, after this night, the scrolls go blank. His last meal is noted a platter of roasted lamb figs and honey cakes, but nothing after. The abrupt silence on parchment is almost louder than the tolling of the drowned bells in the Adriatic legends, a blank page that historians still stare at with furrowed brows. Meanwhile, rumours travelled faster than official announcements. By morning the streets buzzed with wild accounts. Some shouted that barbarians had infiltrated the palace through hidden tunnels. Others declared that angels had spirited the emperor away a sudden ascension in slippers. One old woman selling onions in the market declared that she dreamt of him walking barefoot across the forum, smiling as though free at last. Within hours, merchants were already selling amulets said to protect against imperial vanishings, proving once again that mystery can always be monetized. And here is where the debate thickens into a fog. Was the emperor murdered, his body hidden beneath palace stones? Was he smuggled out to avoid political chaos, perhaps disguised as a monk or beggar? Or did he simply choose to vanish, leaving courtiers to squabble while he slipped into anonymity? Historians still argue whether the entire affair was staged an elaborate piece of theatre designed to smooth a succession or distract from political crises elsewhere. The unanswered questions only deepen the echo, and each scholar who bends close to the silence seems to hear a different story. For now, picture the palace itself as the last witness, tall marble walls bathed in moonlight corridors smelling of smoke and incense, bronze doors gleaming faintly as if holding secrets. Somewhere inside a chamber stands empty bedclothes, neatly folded sandals resting beside the bed, and a jug of water left untouched. The silence presses in like another piece of furniture, solid and unavoidable. No footprints cross the mosaic floor, no witness can be trusted, and yet the Empire wakes to find its ruler gone. The mystery has no neat edges. It swells outward, carried by rumour and fear, until the whole city feels its tug. The rumours do not stay confined to cloisters or courts. They slip into the alleys of Rome, into the taverns where wine flows from amphorae, and where a man's tongue loosens faster than the drawstring of his purse. Here the disappearance of the emperor becomes less a matter of theology or strategy, and more a story to be traded for laughs for dread, or simply for the satisfaction of feeling cleverer than one's neighbour. The air buzzes with tales, each taller than the last, and each stitched with a kernel of fear that the empire's crown is no longer secure. Rome thrives on gossip, almost as much as it thrives on bread and circuses, and this particular story feeds both appetites. A cobbler tells his apprentice that the emperor slipped into the sewers to escape a prophecy. A butcher claims that foreign assassins spirited him away in the belly of a cart full of ox hides. One wag even insists that he was transformed into a bird for mocking Jupiter, never mind that the man telling it cannot identify the species. If pressed, he waves his hand and says a crow perhaps, or a dove, depending on the mood of the gods. Historians still argue whether such rumours were born in malice fear or simply the Roman talent for creative exaggeration. Meanwhile, tavern-goers raise their cups and invent conspiracies with the ease of men who have little to lose but their sobriety. One man swears he heard a senator whisper that the emperor had been hidden away in a secret villa on the Palatine Hill guarded by eunuchs, with knives sharp enough to shave marble. Another insists the Praetorian Guards staged the whole thing, moving their master like a chess piece, while they negotiated which general or governor might next wear the purple. The irony, of course, is that many of these drunken theories echo ideas genuinely whispered in the Senate halls. The line between alehouse chatter and senatorial debate is thinner than Roman parchment. At night, lanterns sputter outside the taverns while voices slosh like the wine. In one corner, a storyteller rises on an upturned amphora, his hands sweeping wide as he claims that the emperor now walks the catacombs beneath the city, wearing rags and blessing the bones of martyrs. The crowd gasps, crosses themselves, and then bursts into laughter. Yet the story will be retold in another quarter tomorrow, each time picking up more details, like a snowball of superstition rolling downhill. The Romans, masters of narrative, cannot resist shaping their emperor's absence into something that entertains as much as it unsettles. And in the quieter corners the disappearance is whispered with less mirth. Mothers hush children by warning that if they misbehave, the vanished emperor will come at night and drag them to the underworld. Lovers exchange worried glances, wondering whether political chaos might follow, whether the games will still be funded, or whether grain shipments from Egypt will be disrupted. These are not grand conspiracies, but the fears of ordinary people, and in many ways they strike closer to the heart of the matter. A vanished emperor does not just unsettle marble halls, it unsettles the price of bread. The marketplace becomes a hive of speculation. Fishmongers argue that the sea has claimed him, merchants swear that foreign caravans carried him east, and one old woman clutching a basket of figs insists that she saw him wander past her stall in disguise, eyes darting like a man pursued. Was it true? Almost certainly not, but such eyewitness claims spread like fire in a city where rumour is oxygen. Historians still argue whether some of these supposed sightings were deliberate fakes, men dressing as the emperor to stir unrest, or whether the crowd simply wove visions out of desire. In between jokes and wild claims, real unease simmers. A city that thrives on spectacle now finds itself watching for the next act in a drama with no script. Will the emperor return in triumph, or will his absence invite rivals to seize the stage? People glance nervously at soldiers marching through the streets, at senators slipping into meetings behind closed doors. The laughter in the taverns is edged with nervousness, the sort that asks whether it is safer to laugh loudly, or keep silent altogether. One fringe tale even suggests that the emperor had been spirited away by priests to fulfill some ancient prophecy. According to this version, he must wander the empire disguised as a beggar, until Rome learns humility, at which point he will return to the throne in glory. Conveniently, this allows anyone to claim that a ragged man begging for coins might be the emperor in disguise, More than one unfortunate pauper was likely teased or even harassed by drunkards, eager to test whether his Latin was refined enough to belong to a royal tongue. The rumours ripple outward beyond the city. Travellers carry them to port towns and sailors spread them across the Mediterranean. Soon markets in Alexandria and Antioch buzz with word of the vanished emperor, each version more outlandish than the last. Some insist he had been kidnapped by Persians, others that he sought refuge among philosophers in Athens, while a particularly fanciful version claims he descended into the crater of Mount Etna to converse with Vulcan himself. If you think that sounds like a plot from an ancient action play, you would not be far wrong. The boundary between history and theatre was always porous, and Romans loved a performance even when it unfolded in rumour, rather than marble amphitheatres. The ordinary citizens adapt in the way they always have, with a blend of humour, fear and resilience. Bread is still baked, sandals are still cobbled, the circus games still roar with animal fights and chariot races. But beneath it all there lingers a hollow where certainty once lived. The emperor was supposed to be eternal, a living anchor of stability. To have him vanish without a trace rattles the foundations of civic imagination. People fill that hollow with stories because silence is unbearable. Better to believe he became a bird or a beggar or a god than to face the simple, chilling truth that no one knows where he is. By dawn, the taverns empty their flagstones sticky with spilled wine, their air thick with the last fumes of oil lamps. Somewhere a bard scratches down a song about the emperor who slipped into the shadows, and by evening it will be sung at another corner. The rumour mill grinds endlessly powered not just by idle talk, but by the desperate need of a people to explain the inexplicable. And so, in Rome, the vanished emperor becomes both a ghost story and a political puzzle, retold until even the tellers forget what began it. The search for Emperor Valentinian III begins to stretch thin, not just in the streets of Rome, but in the imagination of everyone who whispers about him. Days pass without a sighting, then weeks. By the time a month ticks by, rumour is no longer an accessory, it becomes the entire outfit people wear when they talk about the emperor. Some say he left his chamber disguised as a beggar, and slipped onto a cart carrying amphorae of olive oil, the same amphorae that weigh about 20 litres, or a little over 5 gallons each, which means if he hid inside one, he would have been folded up like laundry. Others insist he was spirited away by foreign agents, perhaps Goths, Vandals, or even Persian envoys lurking in the shadows of the Eternal City. Historians still argue whether these speculations reflect real political anxieties, or if they are simply the imagination of a capital city addicted to gossip. One thing is certain, the machinery of empire cannot pause for a single missing man, even if he wears the purple. Grain still arrives from Africa, though sometimes late. Senators still debate in the Curia, though their arguments sound more like peacocks complaining than like legislation. And soldiers still drill in the Campus Martius, their shields glinting in the afternoon sun. The absence of the emperor does not halt the empire, but it leaves a hollow that everyone feels. Courtiers glance over their shoulders, more often servants whisper in corners, and the people in the streets mutter that perhaps Rome has become a ship without a helmsman. The jokes grow darker too. One wit emboldened by wine quips that perhaps the emperor has joined Romulus, the city's mythical founder, who famously disappeared in a storm and was said to have been taken up by the gods. The idea of two emperors separated by centuries, both whisked away into the ether, tickles the Roman sense of irony. Still, laughter dies quickly when paired with fear, and beneath the chuckles runs the unsettling truth that no one actually knows what has become of their ruler. The Senate convenes in hurried meetings, and the marble hall echoes with voices raised in panic. Some senators suggest declaring the emperor dead to clear the path for succession, but others warn that doing so might ignite civil war. Without an heir, firmly named ambitious generals could declare themselves Caesar faster than you can say cross the Rubicon. The memory of usurpers still burns in their minds, and the last thing anyone wants is another round of generals marching legions into the city. Historians still argue whether the Senate truly debated this openly, or if later writers exaggerated the drama, but the possibility of chaos was undeniably real. Meanwhile, the people cling to stranger explanations. One legend claims that Valentinian was taken by angels for judgment lifted bodily from his palace, and carried toward the heavens like a bronze statue hoisted by ropes. Another rumour insists he was cursed by sorcerers, and vanished into the Tiber, his reflection swallowed while his body turned to mist. Quirky as these tales sound, they reflect a culture where the line between superstition and politics is as blurry as wine spilled on parchment. After all, if crocodile dung could once be recommended as sunscreen, why not believe that emperors dissolve into rivers, In the taverns, sailors swear that foreign spies have claimed responsibility. They pound their mugs, each mug holding about a litre, or a little more than a quart, and shout that the emperor was smuggled out of the city in a merchant ship bound for Carthage. Others laugh and say if he were indeed hiding on a ship, he must have gotten seasick before Ostia, since the emperor was rumoured to despise travel by sea. Quirks of personality become clues, and every fragment of gossip is treated like a breadcrumb leading toward a vanishing figure. Behind the laughter, though, lies dread. Rome, once unshakable, now feels porous. If an emperor can vanish from his own guarded palace, what hope do ordinary citizens have of safety? Senators reinforce their villas with extra guards. Priests remind congregations that the bells toll for divine warnings, not for bedtime stories. And in the streets, beggars invent new prayers asking Jupiter Christ, or whichever god will listen to reveal where the emperor has gone. The army, restless as ever, becomes a crucial part of the mystery. Generals murmur in their tents that perhaps the emperor was murdered and hidden away by rivals. Others whisper that he fled voluntarily, fearing conspiracies within his own ranks. Soldiers stationed in the city begin to suspect each other, and the possibility of mutiny hovers like smoke over a brazier. Yet the empire still needs its armies at the frontiers, and commanders worry that too much uncertainty in Rome will ripple outward to the provinces. Historians still argue whether these tensions contributed to the empire's increasing fragility in the mid-5th century. Curiously, the clergy sees the story as well. Bishops preach that the emperor's disappearance is a lesson in humility. If rulers can vanish overnight, then ordinary believers should remember that life itself is uncertain and fleeting. Some monks even spin tales that the emperor has gone to live secretly among them, trading silk robes for woolen habits, and power for prayer. It is a charming notion, though anyone who has lived in a monastery knows that the smell of lentils and the monotony of chants are hardly a tempting refuge for a man used to gilded halls. Still, the idea sticks. People enjoy believing their emperor might be wandering disguised in the countryside, a secret shepherd of souls, rather than a shepherd of armies. It is the kind of tale that makes an uncertain world feel more like a fable, and fables are easier to live with than chaos. As weeks turn to months, the mystery deepens instead of fading. Rome does not collapse, but it does not find answers either. Whispers of Valentinian's fate stretch outward along the empire's roads, carried by merchants, pilgrims, and travellers. In Gaul, soldiers hear that he was assassinated by his own guards. In Egypt, merchants insist he has fled to seek refuge with the desert hermits. In Constantinople, courtiers smirk that the Western emperor was never more than a ghost in the first place. Each version grows taller, stranger and harder to disprove. Through it all, the empire holds its breath. The palace walls remain silent. The senators pace their marble floors, the soldiers sharpen their swords, and the people lean into rumour as if it were bread. The emperor's absence becomes both a wound and a mirror, reflecting all the fears and fantasies of a civilization staggering under its own weight. The vanished man is no longer just one ruler. He is the embodiment of uncertainty itself. The absence of Emperor Valentinian III no longer feels like a momentary crisis. It becomes an entire era defined by uncertainty. His disappearance spreads across the empire like ink seeping into parchment, blotting into corners far from Rome. In provincial towns, people wake to gossip before they even greet the sunrise. Did the emperor vanish because of divine wrath? Was he carried off by unseen assassins? Or was it something stranger still, like the sea, swallowing bells and never returning them? Historians still argue whether the stories that travelled through Gaul, Hispania and North Africa were genuine attempts to explain the mystery, or if they were simply evidence of a restless imagination that thrived on imperial chaos. In Gaul, legionaries at the Rhine frontier grumble that the emperor has abandoned them. Their pay is already late, their boots already thin, and now they hear that Rome itself has no captain at the helm. A centurion makes a dark joke that perhaps the emperor has enlisted with the enemy, switching purple robes for a barbarian cloak. His comrades laugh uneasily, though the sound fades quickly as they realize it is not entirely beyond possibility. The empire has seen emperors betray legions before, and loyalty is never guaranteed when power dangles like a plump grape in late summer. Meanwhile, in the markets of Alexandria, merchants tell a different tale. They claim the emperor is alive disguised as a pilgrim wandering the desert. Some even say he sought out hermits for guidance, those same holy men who eat little more than roots and speak with eyes glazed in visions. Quirky as this may sound, the idea fits a recurring Roman trope rulers who flee to asceticism when the weight of the crown becomes unbearable. Of course, anyone who has tasted desert rations knows that imperial banquets do not easily prepare a man for cactus stew. In Constantinople, the disappearance is fodder for smug delight. The court there, ever ready to look down on the Western Empire, murmurs that Valentinian was never much of an emperor anyway. One scribe with ink as sharp as his wit writes that the West has misplaced its shadow, suggesting that the emperor was so insubstantial he could vanish without anyone noticing. Still, even in Byzantium, curiosity lingers. Some whisper that Valentinian was assassinated on orders from rivals, his body disposed of in some hidden corner of the palace. Others suggest he slipped across the sea in disguise, perhaps to appear later, with dramatic flair like a stage actor waiting for applause. The clergy, as always, step into the void. Bishops warn that the emperor's disappearance is a sign of sin at the heart of Rome. Some insist that it foreshadows the fall of the city itself, a punishment for arrogance. Preachers thunder from pulpits that God has removed his chosen instrument to remind mortals of their fragility. At the same time, a few monks embrace a more whimsical interpretation, claiming the emperor is still alive but has joined their order. They picture him milking goats and chanting psalms in indigo robes instead of imperial purple, though anyone who has actually tried to milk a goat might question the plausibility of such a retirement plan. Rumour is not content with theology alone. Practical men speculate too. A senator worried about grain supplies from Africa suggests that the emperor was kidnapped by vandals spirited across the sea and held for ransom. Soldiers shake their heads, pointing out that no ransom demand has arrived. But fear does not require evidence, it only requires repetition. By the time a rumour has crossed one tavern and 3 mugs of wine, each mug about a litre, or a little over a quart, it becomes truth to those eager to believe. Stories multiply faster than rabbits in spring. Some people swear the emperor was poisoned his body hidden in the palace cisterns. Others claim he escaped dressed as a woman, slipping past guards in a saffron veil. Still others insist he was devoured by wild beasts brought into the city for games, a tale as dramatic as it is logistically absurd. Historians still argue whether any of these wild accounts were recorded seriously, or whether later chroniclers inserted them to entertain readers weary of war and famine. The empire itself feels the weight of not knowing. Diplomats hesitate, unsure whom to address. Governors in the provinces grow bolder, issuing decrees without waiting for imperial approval. Armies at the frontiers begin to wonder if loyalty still matters when no hand guides them. The political fabric, already frayed, begins to resemble a tunic worn too often, in battle threadbare and vulnerable to tearing. Among ordinary citizens, the mystery takes on a superstitious glow. Children are warned not to wander at night lest they vanish like the emperor. Traders selling small bronze trinkets, a bel air across there, claim their wares can protect against sudden disappearance. One enterprising smith even fashions miniature keys, telling buyers they will lock their feet to the earth, so no mysterious force can snatch them away. The charms weigh barely half a kilogram, about a pound, but they sell briskly, because fear often spends coin more eagerly than joy. As the months roll on, the absence becomes permanent by default. Rome survives, yes, but it staggers. Without Valentinian, the empire leans into memory and myth to explain what it cannot confirm. Some whisper he will return at the head of an army to reclaim his throne. Others claim he is already dead, his soul tolling like a bell beneath the sea of history. And still others shrug, deciding that emperors vanish just like cities' bells and certainties they are swallowed without notice, leaving behind only echoes. Through it all, the streets of Rome echo with a peculiar mix of dread and resignation. Life goes on, grain is still measured, baths, still steam markets, still shout. But the emperor's absence has become the city's greatest ghost. Not one carved in marble, not one painted in fresco, but one that lingers in conversations, prayers and nightmares. The mystery is not solved, but perhaps that is the point. An emperor lost to rumour is an emperor who belongs equally to fear and to imagination. The disappearance of Valentinian III lingers like incense in a closed basilica, curling upward, elusive, clinging to walls long after the smoke itself is gone. In a city as crowded with legends as Rome, the vanishing of an emperor is not swallowed by time, but rather embroidered by it, each century stitching its own colours onto the mystery. He becomes less a man and more a motif, the ruler who walked into silence. Historians still argue whether blades met his flesh in some shadowed corner, or whether he simply stepped away from destiny. But whatever the truth, his absence takes on a life of its own. Contemporaries whispered with unease. One senator muttered that the emperor had been plucked away like grain before the harvest, while another compared his disappearance to the sudden collapse of a colonnade silent until the stones hit the ground. For ordinary Romans, the story struck closer to home. If an emperor could vanish from his own guarded palace, how could a baker trust that his stall would be safe at dawn, or a mother trust that her child would return from market Rome, already trembled under pressures? Barbarian raids, failing revenues, fraying loyalties, and Valentinian's absence seemed to crystallize those fears into one unforgettable image: a purple robe with no body inside it. In the years that followed, different regions shaped the tale for their own purposes. In Gaul, poets insisted that the vanished emperor was a sign the West had forfeited divine favour. In Africa, merchants joked darkly that he had been misplaced like a crate of amphorae, 20 litres each 5 gallons of spilled fortune swept into the sea without refund. Byzantine commentators, never shy with smugness, declared that Valentinian had been unworthy of Rome, and that the gods themselves had cleaned the imperial roster. Yet even they passed along the story because mystery-like trade never respects borders. Taverns kept the tale alive with theatrical exaggeration. One favourite version had Valentinian abducted by barbarians, disguised as acrobats, who supposedly juggled their way through palace gates. Another insisted he slipped into gladiator's armour to taste true freedom in the arena. A particularly mocking account claimed he tripped on his overlong toga, toppled into a cistern, and was never fished out again. Beneath the laughter, however, sat a pulse of anxiety. If the empire's head could vanish in an instant, then perhaps the empire itself could too. The church folded the mystery into sermons. Preachers thundered that Valentinian's fate was a warning proof that rulers who neglected their faith might be seized without notice. Others offered a gentler reading, claiming he had been spared further sin carried off like Elijah, but without the chariot of fire more puddles than pyres. Pilgrims whispered his name like a ghostly relic, uncertain whether to mourn him as a sinner or revere him as a saint undone by mystery. Scholars too found metaphors irresistible. One compared the missing emperor to the Antikythera mechanism, intricate, confounding, and still spinning in shadows. Another likened him to the drowned bells of the Adriatic, heard but unseen tolling without a source. Their comparisons reveal more about their hunger for puzzles than about Valentinian himself, but they ensured that his story endured. After all, historians have a knack for feeding mysteries into the machinery of metaphor until the result looks like scholarship. In medieval chronicles, Valentinian's disappearance morphed into moral instruction. Kings were told, guard your palaces, for even emperors may be swallowed whole. In Renaissance drama, he returned as a tragic figure undone not by war but by silence, an emperor conquered by nothing more than absence. Later ages made him a symbol of fragile authority invoked whenever governments tottered. Each retelling bent the story to fit the age's anxieties like wax softened and reshaped by a new seal. Ordinary people, however, carried the memory more intimately. They lit candles in chapels, whispering prayers not to Valentinian but for their own security. Some claimed to hear faint bells during vigils tying his fate to other maritime mysteries. A cup of watered wine, half a litre just over a pint, might serve as comfort, while they debated whether his absence meant divine wrath or divine rescue. Parents warned children to be obedient, for even emperors were not immune to sudden removal. The story became domestic, tucked into lullabies as much as into chronicles. The centuries polished the tale until it gleamed with contradictions. Was he murdered, spirited away? A wanderer who chose anonymity over purple? Each possibility told listeners something about themselves, their fears, their hopes, their appetite for gossip. Valentinian, by ceasing to exist visibly, existed everywhere imaginatively. And perhaps that was his final power. Statues crumble, coins corrode, but a mystery renews itself every time it is retold. Now let the story settle the way dusk settles on marble steps. The emperor who disappeared does not need to return. The mystery is his legacy, and it is enough. Picture the palace fading into quiet, its corridors hushed, its guards uncertain whether to wait or sleep. Imagine the Adriatic at night, still as polished stone, holding both bells and secrets beneath its surface. Some truths lie beyond reach, but their echoes cradle us all the same. Breathe in slowly as though you are drawing in the cool night air of a city finally at rest. Breathe out gently as though you are laying aside the burdens of the day. Let your shoulders loosen, your jaw ease, and your thoughts drift like lanterns set upon a river. The Romans carried stories for centuries. Tonight you carry only calm. If you listen, the bells grow faint, their tolls no longer warnings but reassurances. They do not demand, they soothe. They do not command, they accompany. As the sound fades, let it steady your pulse. You are almost asleep. The night keeps watch. The sea keeps time, and the bells wherever they are toll softly for rest for yours long and kind.